Birmingham, Alabama, or are you?
No.
No? Oh, sorry. You must be from Jackson, Mississippi then. Where are you from?
Near Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. Oh, civilization. Okay. No, this is civilization. So are you from all over the US, or?
Sort of.
Yeah. Okay. Well, welcome to Scotland. Welcome to Dundee. Most Americans tend to come to Edinburgh, and that's about it. But the Highlands as well, of course, and Dundee as well. I'm a Presbyterian minister, so I could talk for 45 minutes, and that'd just be my first point. So you're kind of limited. I know that Harry's not like that. So I thought what I'd do is I'd just give you a wee introduction to the building here and some of the stuff that goes on, the history of it. Then you feel free to ask questions about any aspect that you want. This building was built in 1836. It was then on the western end of Dundee. It was part of a huge, massive, poor industrial area. Mills. Basically, we did all the juice that covered the wagons that conquered Texas. So you owe us big time. You'll discover about the Scots that everything that's good we invented. We managed to take credit for all these kinds of things. You know, we invented television, we invented roads, we invented tarmac, you know, of course. We invented radio, we invented penicillin. I tease my American friends that you invented string cheese and the nuclear bomb. But anyway, this was the part here. Robert Murray McShane was the first minister. He came here in 1836 as a very young man. He was only here 7 years. He came here when he was 22, died when he was 29. His grave is out the side there. You can see it. There's a monument to him. The church was registered to seat 1,100 people, believe it or not. It doesn't look that big, but it had pews down here. We've only refurbished the building about 3 years ago, and but even so, 1,100 people. That's because 150 years ago, people were about a foot shorter and 2 stone lighter as well. Initially, he saw some success. It was a church plant, effectively one of 250 churches that Thomas Chalmers was responsible for planting. There would have been several hundred people come. The pews, if you go upstairs, you can see on the pews, you can see that there are wee name tags. When someone came in and said, "You're sitting in my seat," that was literally true because you rented your pew. And being good Presbyterians, the cheap seats were at the front and the more expensive ones were at the back. Which is really interesting. McShane he's well known, he's a godly young man. In fact, I grew up in the Free Church thinking that his first name was Godly, because you always heard the godly Robert Murray McShane, the saintly Robert Murray McShane, and so on. But he was a bit frustrated in the church here. He didn't see the growth that he'd expected, particularly in terms of conversions. That's what he was looking for. He was also a very sick man in some ways. He suffered from depression. I did a lot of study on McShane and discovered at least 2 times when he had a kind of breakdown. He was a very committed and holy young man. And in 1839, he went to Israel. And the amazing story about his trip to Israel with 3 other men. It took them 6 months. He got beaten up in Poland by a couple of Austrian shepherds. He almost died in Turkey. He celebrated communion in Jerusalem. I was asked to do a PhD on why Scottish evangelicals were responsible for the modern state of Israel, which I thought was interesting. But actually there's an element of truth in that, because McShane, Boner and others went to the Clapham group in London, and out of that group came something called the Balfour Declaration, which was when the British Empire declared after the First World War that they would support a Jewish state. And since Britain at that time controlled Palestine, that's how the modern state of Israel came about. And there's a direct link from that. Another interesting link is that I was here one time and an elderly Chinese gentleman came in. I don't have it just now, but it's being restored, but we had an old photograph of a man called Eiley Burns. And Eiley Burns came here when McShane was in Israel. And Eiley Burns was a character. He was an evangelist in a Presbyterian church. The church didn't quite know what to do with him. So he went to Northern Ireland, he came here, he eventually went to China. This Chinese man came to me and said, "Can I buy that photograph?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry, because it's the only one we have. It's one of the very first photographs ever taken." And he said, I said, "Why do you want it?" And he said, "Because that man is the founding father of the modern Chinese church." Which is astonishing, and actually, it's true. Even before Hudson Taylor, Eiley Burns went as a Scottish Presbyterian missionary to China, dressed in Chinese clothes, and was greatly used of the Lord. He and Hudson Taylor met one another. So, McShane went to Israel. During the 6 months he was in Israel, Eiley Burns came here, and there'd been a genuine revival in Kilsyth towards Glasgow. And Eiley Burns had been there and been part of that, came here. It started here.